Lost media has been a topic that has interested me over the past couple years. The idea that information that is not easily available, or perhaps even a mystery, is fascinating, and is partially why so many people, myself included, are dedicated to searching for it. What especially interests me is lost media related to things that I'm familiar with, since it's interesting to know that there's hidden knowledge about various series that I love. As you probably know already, I really like Nintendo games, and that specific area of lost media is what interests me the most. There happens to be a lot of Nintendo-related lost media, since there are things like prototypes of games, early trailers, Nintendo-related TV shows, and cancelled games. So in this video, I will be covering some of my favorite pieces of Nintendo lost media, which will cover a lot of different categories and a few different Nintendo series. And before we get started, I just wanted to mention that this video is partially inspired by L Supersonic Q. I've been watching his content for a couple years now, and it's part of what got me interested in lost media, so if you like this video, I definitely recommend checking out his channel. So without further ado, let's dive into the world of Nintendo lost media. Super Mario World is one of my favorite 2D Mario games, and I have a lot of memories of playing it as a kid, as I occasionally played a couple SNES games alongside the Wii and DS games. The development history for this game was pretty interesting, as it started as far back as 1987 and was one of the first games developed for the Super Famicom. It was originally developed as a port of Super Mario Bros. 3, but eventually was used as a base for a completely new Mario game. In 1989, an early build of the game was shown off, and information about it was eventually published in a Japanese magazine in 1990. This build looked much different from the final version, which is why it's so interesting and is worth looking into. One of the first things that can be noticed about this build is the raccoon suit from Super Mario Bros. 3, and many of the enemies and other textures had a style similar to the Super Mario Bros. 3 counterparts. The world map also had a completely different layout, with it seeming to have a more open-ended structure similar to how Super Mario Land 2 would eventually be. In 2020, the infamous GigaLeak revealed more about this mysterious build, as it contained unused enemies, Mario designs, and early sprites of Yoshi where he had a very different design. Other than these early sprites and screenshots from the magazine, we don't know much about this build of Super Mario World. It would be very interesting to see actual gameplay footage of this build, but it's unlikely due to the fact that it was only seen in that magazine, and Nintendo often doesn't share information about early builds of their games. However, there is a possibility that we could get more early sprites or other bits and pieces of information released in a similar way to the GigaLeak, but that's still unlikely. The next piece of lost media that interests me has to do with the Kirby series, and if you didn't know already, the Kirby series has a ton of lost media. There are cancelled games such as Kid Kirby or Kirby Bowl 64, as well as early prototypes such as the fully 3D Kirby 64 prototype. However, my favorite piece of Kirby lost media has to be Kirby GCN, since it has a long and interesting history. This consists of 3 different cancelled games that eventually led to the development of Kirby's Return to Dreamland, and each cancelled game is pretty interesting and is much different than anything else we've seen from the series, which is why they are worth searching for. The first cancelled game, and the one that most people know about, was developed for the GameCube in the early 2000s and was shown off at E3 2005. This game had a 2.5D style similar to Kirby 64 and had a mechanic where you could summon 3 enemies as allies, similar to what was eventually implemented in Kirby Star Allies. Many of the backgrounds and areas seen in this build are very interesting, and some would eventually end up in Return to Dreamland. The footage that is currently available includes a 50-second trailer and 2 10-second clips of footage that we found earlier this year, as well as a few screenshots. Since new footage of this build has been found, there is a possibility that more footage or even a second trailer of this cancelled game exists. The 2 other cancelled Kirby games before Return to Dreamland have very little info available though, since only one screenshot of each game was found. One appears to be a 3D platformer, like what Forgotten Land would eventually be, and it appears to still be developed for the GameCube due to the aspect ratio. The other seems to be a 2D platformer in the style of Wario Land Shake It, kind of like a pop-up style, and was likely developed for the Wii. Both of these cancelled projects are very interesting because unlike the first cancelled games, these ones appear to be very different to how Return to Dreamland eventually turned out. It would be very interesting to see more footage of these cancelled games, but it's unlikely unless HAL releases more information through interviews or anything showcasing the history of the series. The next topic is very different from the previous two, as it's not a cancelled game or prototype. Rather, it's a lost TV show based on Bowser. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, Beak Entertainment produced multiple cartoons based on Nintendo IPs, including Mario and Zelda. I grew up watching the Super Mario Bros. Super Show and Super Mario World on DVD as a kid, so I definitely have a lot of nostalgia towards this weird, yet interesting side of Nintendo. What's even weirder than these cartoons, though, is the fact that they made a live-action spin-off of the Super Mario Bros. Super Show starring King Koopa, complete with a live audience. It's really interesting that they chose King Koopa over Mario, but that's kind of what makes this show interesting, so that's likely why they chose that character to be the host. King Koopa is one of my favorite interpretations of Bowser, so it's pretty cool seeing content based on that version of the character. Basically, this show had King Koopa host different segments, and public domain cartoons played in between the different segments. King Koopa occasionally interacted with the live audience of children, which had shirts and masks based on Koopa Troopas. In other segments, he read fan mail and also had jokes and short skits. So far, all that was found of this show was the intro as well as a few short clips. They really do show how wacky and interesting this show was, and it just showcases a really obscure and interesting part of Nintendo history. One game series that I really don't see brought up when mentioning lost media is Splatoon, and that's likely due to how new the franchise currently is. However, there was something very interesting about the development history that Nintendo showed back at GDC 2018. It's generally well known that Splatoon started out with characters that are blocks of tofu, then they switched to rabbits, and eventually the Inklings and Octolings. But two screenshots showed that they had other ideas for the characters in the game, before they settled on some of the others. Two development screenshots show Mario and Yoshi as playable characters, implying that at some point, the devs thought about making a Mario game. It's unknown how far this idea went, or if any other Mario characters were planned, but it's still very interesting. It would also be interesting to see how the Mario characters would have worked in Splatoon, and how the animations would have worked. It's unlikely that we'll get more information about this build, due to the fact that Nintendo's recent development history is relatively unknown and kept a secret, but it's interesting that we actually got information about this build at all. This is a pretty unusual build of Splatoon, and it's fascinating, and I wanted to mention it in this video because I don't see it brought up that often. The last topic in this video is the one I've been the most interested in, and is the only one that I've been actively searching for. Over the past 2 years, I've been very interested in the development of Paper Mario Sticker Star, since it started out being a true successor to the first two games in the series, but eventually shifted into something completely different. The first time this game was showcased was at E3 2010, and while it wasn't shown in the actual presentation, it was announced online and through press releases. This version of the game was much different from the final product, as it had an art style similar to TTYD, and it had many features from the older games. The character designs resembled the Thousand Year Door in Super Paper Mario, a Chain-Chomp partner followed Mario, the stickers appeared to look like Thousand Year Door badges, and there was even an original King Monty Mole boss fight. A trailer was made for this early build of the game, and it's estimated to be roughly a minute long. This seemed to have been only shown at the 3DS show floor, since the only footage that we have of it is a 14-second camera recording from Nintendo World Report. The full trailer was never posted online in any capacity, and almost no traces of it exist, except for the clip previously mentioned. However, somehow we do have the full clean audio from the trailer, as it was uploaded onto the Nintendo World Report website, which is very weird because they likely wouldn't have been able to record it like that on the show floor. This could possibly mean that Nintendo sent out a press copy of the video to various journalists, but an NDA or embargo restricted them from posting it online. Reaching out to various reporters who were at E3 might be the most likely shot to getting the full trailer, since there's possibly a chance that someone out there still has a copy of it. I hope this is eventually found, because this is a very important part of Paper Mario history, as well as Mario history in general. If you want to know more about this trailer, or other information about Sticker Star's development history, I recommend checking out the video I made back in February, and I also recommend checking out Thoughtful the Great's channel, as she has some information about the beta as well. So anyways, those are my favorite pieces of Nintendo Lost Media, and I hope we will find more information about them at some point. What are your favorite pieces of Nintendo Lost Media, and what are your favorite pieces of Lost Media in general? Let me know down in the comments. So anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and make sure to check out my Discord server and Twitter if you want to. Goodbye.